Hello, Roland here. In a recent speech to some college students, Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos noted the opposition to abortion reminded her of the ending of slavery. She said, President Lincoln too contended with the pro-choice argument of his day. They suggested that a state's choice to be slave or to be free had no moral question in it. Well, President Lincoln reminded those pro-choicers that there is a vast portion of American people that do not look upon that matter as being this very little thing. They look upon it as a vast moral evil. Lincoln was right about slavery's choice then, and he would be right about the life choice today. Shortly after Secretary DeVos made these remarks, she was taken to task by Representative Ayanna Pressley, who clearly had a problem with the view that abortion had anything in common with slavery. Accordingly, she tweeted, "Dear Betsy, as a black woman and chair of the Abortion Access Task Force, I invite you to come to the Hill and say this to my face. Would welcome the opportunity to educate you." Well, as a black man who wants to see the end of abortion, a practice that has ended the lives of over 61 million babies, including an estimated 20 million who are black, I am delighted that Secretary DeVos highlighted the similarities between slavery and abortion advocacy. First, supporters of abortion and slavery both subscribe to the notion that how one came into being determines whether one should be considered a human being, in a legal sense. In other words, the circumstances of one's birth determine one's worth. In the case of slavery, just the fact that one was black meant that one could be considered less than, and as such, could be denied all constitutional rights and protections. With abortion, the issue is not skin color, but rather wantedness. If the baby is not wanted by the mother, the baby is considered of less worth. Second, with slavery and abortion, there is a pernicious power dynamic at play. The frequently quoted pro-choice mantra, "My body, my choice," is extended to the vulnerable with an additional mantra, "Your body, my choice." For example, slave codes, which regulated how slaves could be treated and punished, usually allowed the killing of slaves with no legal consequence for the slave owner. With abortion, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton operate under essentially the same principle. The unborn child is treated not as a separate and distinct human life, but rather as property of the mother that can be killed with no legal consequences. Third, with slavery and abortion, there is a dehumanization and commercialization of vulnerable people. In other words, the notions that slaves and the unborn have intrinsic worth is rejected, and they have instead been ascribed a commercial value or economic cost. Consider how we treat the unborn. In a recent news report, Iceland touted the fact that there were virtually no babies born with Down syndrome in the country. Here's what one counselor tells women who may be carrying babies with Down syndrome. "This is your life. You have the right to choose how your life will look. We don't look at abortion as murder. We look at it as a thing that we ended. We ended a possible life that may have had a huge complication. And I think that is more right than seeing it as murder. That's so black and white. Life isn't black and white. Life is gray." Indeed, despite the compassionate sounding language, these mothers are not counseled to consider the intrinsic worth of the babies they are carrying, but rather the economic value, what they will cost to raise, and what they can contribute to society. Since they are viewed as a net expense, they are immediately candidates for abortion. In short, when one adopts this perspective, moral clarity is lost in the gray, and in vitro genetic testing starts to look a lot like the examination of slaves on an auction block. Finally, supporters of both slavery and abortion believe that there are certain vulnerable lives worth sacrificing. This perspective is clearly illustrated in a Salon article by pro-choice writer Mary Elizabeth Williams titled, "So What If Abortion Ends a Life?" In the article, she chastised the pro-choice advocates who continue to argue that the unborn child is just a clump of cells. You see, human life is not constructed like a Chevy on an assembly line, which, at some point before it's finished, can be scrapped to make a toaster. Human life develops like a Polaroid picture, that has all of its God-given intrinsic worth and essence at conception, and the fullness of its beauty and wonder are revealed over time. Human life can only be human life. That said, one would think that once Williams had this epiphany about human life, she would change her position about abortion. But alas, she did not. In fact, she ends the article with these words, "And I would put the life of the mother over the life of the fetus every single time, even if I still need to acknowledge my conviction that the fetus is indeed a life worth sacrificing." Now, when you consider her words, it's clear that abortion and slavery have much in common. For example, look what happens when you replace the word mother and fetus with slaveholder and slave. "And I would put the life of the slaveholder over the life of the slave every single time, even if I need to acknowledge my conviction that the slave is indeed a life worth sacrificing." When one considers the similarities between slavery and abortion, it's clear that abortion must be rejected by our nation for the same reason that slavery was. Indeed, as tragic as slavery was for my people, it pales in comparison in terms of the loss of the most vulnerable Black lives as a result of abortion. So there must be an urgency to address the one aspect that abortion and slavery don't share in common. After slavery was codified, protected, and justified at the highest levels in the United States for hundreds of years, it was finally abolished with the 13th Amendment, and Black folks gained citizenship and equal rights with the 14th Amendment. Indeed, I await the great day when a similar court or legislative decision is made to finally liberate the unborn. Until next time, may God bless you daily as you serve Him faithfully.